Welcome to Dr. Jeffrey Roth's Looking Good and Feeling Great podcast, live from Las Vegas, with his co-host, Darrell Craig Harris.
Hi, folks. It's Dr. Jeffrey Roth, your board-certified plastic surgeon in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we're at it again.
I know. This is episode a lot. I actually don't. I need to find out what number this is. Actually, it seems like we've done quite a few. I know we're on our third season, I believe.
Third season. So it's very exciting, and a big thanks out to people that are actually downloading this and listening to us, and we really appreciate that. And if you have something you want to hear us talk about, let us know, and because we're happy to go ahead and try to educate and or maybe entertain, maybe. So but do let us know, and we'll cover it.
Absolutely, and we'd actually like to give a shout out to Music Tribes in France, which is our production company.
Yay!
Nigel's a good guy, and Alex, our engineer here, who's been rocking it. We definitely appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about liposuction, and not only liposuction, but there's a lot that goes into that subject, and also CoolSculpting. It all kind of gets blended together. So
yeah, we talk about a few things. We've talked about this a little bit before about how do you approach the abdomen, right? We'll talk about abdomen and then we'll talk about other places. So the abdomen, again, my head works least invasive to most invasive, right? So first is diet and exercise. How boring, I know. But I say that all the time. If you don't need me, I'm not offended, right? So diet and exercise is always the best. Then comes CoolSculpting, which we have in the office, which we really like in as much as it freezes the fat cells die, and you can get a 25% reduction, which is nice, especially if you're just sitting there watching TV. Then there's liposuction, which we'll cover in a second, and then there's the abdominoplasty, which again we've covered before. And so those are the kind of modalities, those are the tools in the toolbox I have to approach the abdomen. Now, liposuction is interesting because where you have fat, you can most often have liposuction. So liposuction, again, it's been around for a long time, and we plastic surgeons have used it to contour everything from necks to chest, especially with gynecomastia, the man boobs, et cetera, to the abdomens, to the flanks, to the upper back, to sometimes calves, sometimes knees. That's difficult. And to forearms. Also, sometimes if somebody had a reconstructive procedure and we've taken tissue from one area and put on another area, sometimes it kind of looks like a little bit of a big potato, but it's okay because it's covering what you need to cover and it reconstructs what you need to cover. But sometimes you can go back using liposuction as a tool and kind of thin it out a little bit and make it a little bit more aesthetically presentable. So again, liposuction is a tool in the toolbox that you have. Now, there are certain different types of liposuction as well. Now, if you get online, and some of the older websites might say, "Oh, we use the new Temnescent solution." Well, it's not new. We all use it, and it's been around for a long, long time.
And what is that?
Yeah, so Temnescent solution is either lactated ringers or normal saline, which is the same stuff you put in the IV, right? To that, we also add lidocaine, which cuts down on pain, and epinephrine, which cuts down on bruising. So when we're going to go ahead and go into an area, say, hey, I don't like that area, let's liposuction. Then we make a couple of incisions and we instill this Temnescent solution within it. Okay. And then we wait a couple of minutes. And then we go ahead and take the cannula, which we've all seen on YouTube and TV and all that kind of stuff. And we go ahead and we suck out the Temnescent solution along with the fat. And we go ahead and give ourselves a nice contour. And then we make sure that it looks pretty good. And then we go ahead and sew up the holes, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can get into a debate, and we plastic surgeons do this at meetings, of how much do you put in with the Temnescent solution versus how much do you take out. And there's wet and super wet techniques, and we all argue about it and all that kind of stuff. It's one of those things we argue about. Right. But having said that, that's kind of what most guys and gals do nowadays for liposuction. You have to wear the compression garment 6 weeks around the clock and an additional 4 weeks halftime. And that's important because you have the skin layer and then you have the muscle layer, and between that's the fat, right? So you go ahead and you suck out the fat, which is great, and you want that skin to really adhere to the muscle layer underneath, right? So that's why you have the compression garment to do that, because you don't want fluid in there and get lumpies and bumpies, and so that's why we do that. Also, people tend to really like the compression garment. I know it sounds like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I gotta wear Spanx, but basically is even my cops and my firemen, especially when they go back on the job or my folks that go back in the gym, they like wearing it. It gives them support. My cops and my firemen, when they come in and get their liposuction done, typically they'll wear it under their uniform for about 3 months because those guys are always pushing or dragging or pulling or doing something active.
And we should say that because liposuction is not only for women.
No, we have a lot of fellas that come in and do that because these guys are active. They're running full court basketball. They're killing it at the gym, but then they have the genetic fat
problem
right?
areas.
Right. They have the love handles in guys. They have the saddlebags in women, and you can do as much Jane Fonda as you can. But that's genetic fat, and so that plastic surgeons can help you out with that. And what we really kind of like about liposuction in that regard is folks come in, they get their stuff done, and they now look better in a leotard, and now they'll go to Zumba class and do their thing. So usually they come back at about a year because we see people at least a year. And they look great. And now the common questions of liposuction, can it come back in the same place it was? Well, yes. If you eat ho-hos on the couch, it can come back.
Well, the same with the fat surgery. I mean, you can, if you want to eat constantly, you can.
Sure.
Right.
You can get that back. Then too, sometimes it'll go into the B fat, basically what I call the genetic B fat, where, we're not going to put it in the stomach anymore. Let's go ahead and put it in the love handles. So the answer is don't eat ho-hos on the couch. But but two is, but that's usually not an issue because if folks have invested that much time and energy and resources in it, they usually will go ahead and look after it. At least that's been our thankful experience. But there's some criteria also that we use to judge and see if somebody is a good candidate for it or not, right? So, because what happens is you don't want, somebody who's, 500 pounds per se to come in and go, hey, doc, make me 120 pounds. Okay. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. You have to set up realistic
expectations, et cetera. And so folks men over 40, women over 45, for us, we typically have them get a consultation with their family practice doctor, internal medicine doctor, or cardiologist, if they have one, to go ahead and stratify their risk. Okay. So that's fine. Some of the things that we use in-house are, are they healthy enough? Can they walk up 2 flights of stairs?
Sure.
Are they on medicines like Plavix, which is a blood thinner, et cetera, et cetera? So you don't want to
smoke.
Right. Smoking's a big thing, especially with facelifts, breast lifts, tummy tucks, things that are on tension. Those are all screening things. Are they on ibuprofen or aspirin? Are they on, vitamin E, vitamin A? So there's fish oil. There's lots of things that can make things safer or less safe depending on what you have going on. And some of them, tobacco use and stuff, some people are like, okay, well, fine, I'll quit, which is great. Okay. Some folks say, okay, well, I'll give up my fish oil for 2 weeks before and 2 weeks afterwards. Okay, great. And so that usually we make that work. One of the things that we talk about, you and I have talked about, is BMI, body mass index.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about what
there is. It's a bit controversial. And then that came out of, history. We can do PowerPoint for an hour, but basically there was the Metropolitan Life Tables that basically were published long ago. And if you look at those, everybody's overweight, right? As far as height to weight ratios. So that's number one. Number two is the National Institute of Health and some other folks have come up with some tables that are kind of more realistic. The other thing too is you and I were talking about at the break is there are some guys that are in the gym all the time and they're
solid muscle.
There's just solid muscle, right? There's shoulders into a 28-inch waist. And these guys sometimes, if you just go by height versus weight, the short guys that are just ripped, they have 8% body fat, but they're ripped. Technically, they're overweight, but they're just, they're just, specimens or Adonis.
Is that the BMI? Is that is there a U.S. based BMI versus Asia?
That's a great question. So it's usually
I've always kind of wondered about.
It's usually based out of the United States. A lot of the medical literature is, and so sometimes you have to kind of look at it with a bit of a jaundiced eye when you talk about the Asian population or Hispanic population. Okay, so there are some differences, but BMI is kind of more of a screener per se than anything else, and anybody can go ahead and look. It's as easy as plug it into your phone or looking up online.
Right.
So that's number one. How we use it is more of a screening device. Number one, and then two, why it's important. Again, we talk about risk stratification, and those folks that have a higher BMI tend to have higher anesthetic issues, and especially in an outpatient surgery
might have some
setting.
breathing issues.
Right. So are they on a CPAP machine at home? Do they have sleep apnea? Do they have other respiratory issues, et cetera, et cetera? So that's like the big thing if you talk to the anesthesiologist. And I was just talking to my anesthesiologist yesterday in the OR about this very subject. And so it's a screener, but then you have to go ahead and actually, like anything else, individualize and take a look at the patient.
Sure.
The other thing that's really interesting is there's more and more literature to show that the higher the BMI, the worse the result is. And what I mean by that is the risk of, let's say, your wound opening up in a tummy tuck, which is by definition on tension. The higher BMI you have, the more likely that might have a complication, might open. Because it's on tension. It's on tension, and fat does not carry as much blood supply as, say, skin or muscle or bone or that sort of thing. And again, it's all about blood supply. It's all about trying to take tension off the wound to try to get a good result. So yeah, there's a few screeners we have for those things, but by and large, again, you have to take a look at the patient and see what works in your toolbox for that particular patient, and then educate the patient. And because some folks will say, "Oh, yeah, I just wanted 25%." Off. Some people are like, no, doc, take every cell that you can.
Right.
Some folks will say, oh, you got to repair my rectus muscles. So it just really sort of depends on, like anything else, on the patient. But that's why it's important to go ahead and see a doc, board certified plastic surgeon that has been trained in this and has experience in this and knows what they're doing and can give you a good consult.
Right. What's the difference between visceral fat and subcutaneous fat?
Right. So that's actually another key issue on the physical exam. So if I'm looking at an abdomen and basically the fat that I can pinch an inch, the fat that you can pinch, you can do something about. You as a plastic surgeon can do about, right? So you can liposuction it out, you can freeze it, you can cut it out with tummy tuck. Now, what's interesting is the visceral fat or intra-abdominal fat. What's a viscera is your organs, right? It's your small bowel, it's your liver. Okay, so, and there's some fat that's kind of on the inside that surrounds those things.
Right.
There's fat everywhere. You go to anatomy class for the first time in medical school, you're like, man, there's fat everywhere. So,
especially in the United States.
So yeah, that's a whole nother story.
Another subject,
it's a whole nother story. But so visceral fat. So there's fat on the inside. There's also this layer of fat which is just behind the abdominal muscles, right? So let's back up, a little anatomy. First, there's skin, right? Okay. Then there's a layer of fat. That's the pinchable fat that you can do something about. Then there's muscles, right? There's the rectus muscles and the external obliques. Your rectus is your six pack, right? And then you have another layer of fat, and then you have a layer of it's called viscera, which is tough stuff you can actually sew to. So you have that layer of fat, and then you have the visceral fat too. So you have intra-abdominal fat, then you have visceral fat. Fascia is the word I was looking for that you can actually sew to. Okay, so what happens is the outside fat, the fat that's outside the muscles, I as a plastic surgeon can do something about. The stuff that's on the inside of the muscles, the visceral fat, the intra-abdominal fat, I can't get to, right? Because I can't get through the muscles of the abdomen and not get into the liver or spleen.
And that fat's related to lifestyle and genetics.
Right, and genetics. Right. So I don't know, and most of our listeners may not know this guy, but Iron Sheik. I don't know if you guys remember. He was a very strong man. He was, the bad guy. He was WWF or WWE wrestler, right? So strong guy. So anyways, and he had a six-pack, right? So I don't know if they drew it on him, but anyway, a six-pack and very strong man, but he had this protruding abdomen. He had like this beer belly thing. And I'm like, and it took me medical school and it took me to go to a conference after plastic surgery to figure out what he had. I'm like, how come this guy is so ripped and so strong?
Right, but he saw some protruding. Right.
The reason why is he was a beer drinking guy, and all his fat was the visceral and intra-abdominal fat. That's where he genetically stored it.
Interesting.
So he was as a rock, and he would throw guys, or he'd throw Hulk Hogan around and all that kind of stuff, and all that stuff. But he had that protuberance, and that's exactly what we're talking about. So people come into me and they go, "Hey doc, I want to be washboard flat," but they have this visceral fat. I'm like, you can't really do it. Can't do that. I said, I hate to be the guy to tell you, but this is diet and exercise, and it's it's a big fat bummer because people want to be fat, want to be flat. Not fat, and you can't get there even with the technology that we have because of where that particular fat is.
Well, and going to that subject, actually, so you have your mommy makeovers, your tummy tucks, and I was there for one of those surgeries, and part of what we had talked about was when ladies have babies, those muscles stretch, and I don't know the technical term,
Sure.
but part of what you can do is you can actually sew those together, right?
Yeah. So describing is what's called a diastasis recti, right? Which is the recti muscles. Diastasis means spread apart, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is called application, which means put them back together again, right? Now, we don't go into the bowel or anything else. We go ahead and we take a bite with the suture of the fascia, which is that tough stuff I talked about, that envelops these muscles, and then we put things back together again. And the gals who've had babies really like that. It's kind of like having an internal corset, because these gals are doing all these
because it kind of enables them to get a flatter tummy after post-pregnancy.
Sure, and you can look at the stuff on the website, but basically the folks that are doing all of these sit-ups, but they still have this kind of bulge. It's not a hernia. It's just basically that your muscles have moved apart. We also see this in men as well, as surprising as that may be, especially the guys that have lost 70, 100 pounds. And for losing weight, and that in of itself has spread the rectus muscles apart. And so we're able to put that together, give these folks an internal corset.
That's interesting.
And they really like that. And then they go to class and they're doing leg lifts and they're doing sit-ups, and they're not bulging out like they were before. So they dig that.
Yeah, that's great. I know you do a lot with CoolSculpting, and that's actually one of the trending things that you see a lot online, social media. Tell me, and you're actually, what's the term? Because you're actually a preferred provider for CoolSculpting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, they make up some.
I can't remember exactly.
Who knows? Somebody, every so often somebody goes ahead and says, "Oh, you're the thing," or "You're a double dime," or whatever. But yeah, we've had this for a long time, since the inception. Basically, we were the third plastic surgeon, I guess, in town, and now there's like 31 of them that have.
And I should say, I've actually done that. Yep. We experimented on me, and I enjoyed it. And it was, what's great about that is it's not invasive, because a lot of people have heard the term, but they don't maybe they don't know exactly what's involved in having that done.
Yeah. So CoolSculpting is really interesting, in as much as it was developed by a couple guys at Harvard. Of course, it was. In as much as, and it was actually based in Britain. What they found was two things. What they found is these kids that had these cold popsicles, and they were losing fat in their cheeks because the popsicles were weird. And then the equestrians, these females that were in sub-freezing temperature because it's England, and they were on saddles, and they were losing fat in their inner thighs. So that was interesting. So they went ahead and they talked to a couple guys at Harvard that worked on a lot of lasers, and they said, "Oh, hey, come up with it." So what it is basically it's a machine that you go ahead and hey, I don't like this particular part, and we measure things up, and you put the part that you don't like next to this big old suction cup. You press a button, the suction cup sucks the fat into that little suction cup, and then you press a second button, and it gets really cold, 40 degrees centigrade. The fat cells don't like that. The fat cells die, and then you get basically a 25. You can get up to a 25% reduction. So, for example, my dad is a great example. He's 85 years old. He's still very fit for a guy his age. He walks every day.
He's a character.
And he's that too. Drives me love him to death. Free to go home. I'm kidding. Kidding. And but he had the love handles. He didn't like those. So we went ahead and we zapped him a couple times, and he loved it. Now, again, here's a guy 85 years old. He's got 4 stents. He's not an operative candidate, et cetera, et cetera. But hey, this is something we do.
It's a great option.
And the opposite side is even the fittest of the fit. Some of these IBFF gals that come in that are doing the bikini competition or the physique competitions, and they're dieting themselves down and they're clobbering themselves.
But they have those little problem areas.
And they got a little problem area, and they don't want to stop training.
And they don't want scars.
Right. So they come in and we kind of zap that area, and they tend to like that. So again, depends on the patient and really what they want and need. So there's more modalities out there than there ever has been. And there's a ton of modalities for that sort of thing. And there's some are based on heat, some are based on cold, some are based on radio frequency, some are based on laser. There are other machines that stimulate the muscles, and it's like doing 10,000 sit-ups, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of things.
It's always changing
out there
now,
and it's always changing. Yeah. So again, it's a matter of really seeing if it makes sense scientifically, and then seeing if it fits in your practice as to can you help patients with it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I liked about it, again, is like the non-invasive aspect. And I definitely noticed the difference. We did my love handles. And you have 2 machines, which is awesome.
Yes. So, yeah, we were the first to have dual sculpting. That was our claim to fame for a while there. And so, yeah. And so we're able to get people done faster, which was really kind of nice. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Something else we wanted to talk about, we were chatting about this the other day, was eyelid surgery. Mm-hmm. And I'll let you say the word because I won't be able to pronounce it.
Yes, blepharoplasty. So eyelid surgery, yes.
Right. So how common is that? Because I know it's basically, I know a lot of people, they have maybe discussed a facelift, but that's maybe that they don't need that, but they really want to solve the issues with their eyes.
Sure.
So how does that, how common is that? Are you doing a lot of those these days?
Yes, it's very common.
Zoom probably plays a part.
Yes, well
we were talking about before.
Yeah, Zoom has
video conferencing
has fueled video conferencing, and because people are staring at themselves for 8 hours.
Right,
like,
exactly.
I don't like that.
I have the same issue.
So that's number one, and then 2, wearing masks also. People are like looking at eyes and go, well, I'm not sure if
it brings all the focus right to your.
So yeah, actually, I think it's a very nice operation for those folks. Usually 40s, 50s. Females come in a little bit sooner because they wear makeup and they start banging their makeup into the lids or having to crank the lids back to get the makeup on. Men come in about typically 10 years later because they can't see the golf ball anymore after they hit it. That's the way it goes.
Right.
So having said that, so there's upper and lower blepharoplasty. Uppers are obviously the upper lids. And I think it's a really good operation because I think it can really freshen somebody up, especially if they have big, bright eyes. But now you have extra skin, which is kind of crowding things. You can't really see them, can't see the peepers, right? So basically for me, it's going ahead and taking the curtains, which have kind of fallen down, and kind of putting them back up where they're supposed to be, et cetera. And it's nice because you really don't change the person per se that much.
Right. Because we've all seen the overdone.
Right. As long as you keep them warm and friendly and stuff, and the eyes, you don't go crazy. But yeah, I think it can really freshen somebody up, and people really kind of go, "Man, you look great," but I'm not sure why. Right?
Which is perfect.
That's perfect. Exactly. That's the holy grail in my mind in plastic surgery. So the upper lids, basically, you take the skin off. You have a couple fat pockets. You go after the fat pockets. And another nice thing about blepharoplasty, eyelid surgery, from a plastic surgery standpoint, is where you hide the incision, because everybody's got a natural crease where this little muscle called the levator palpebrae is like a little hook, and it goes ahead and pulls your eyelid up. So basically, it's because that's where the crease is, and so basically you hide that line right in that crease. Plastic surgeons, we still make scars, incision lines, but we try to hide them.
Right. Always trying to minimize.
Stuff, right? So it's really, that's kind of nice because that fades, and it usually go right into a crease, and that's terrific. Lower lids are a little bit more interesting because you don't want things to kind of drop down and get this thing called a ectropion, so that's a bummer. But so what we do a pinch blepharoplasty, which was made famous by Dr. Lauren Rosenfield, who was a professor of mine up at UCSF. Shout out to him. And what you do is you take a pinch of the lower lid, and and sometimes you can take a centimeter depending on how much skin people have, but you pinch it, and so you know that that's the amount that you're supposed to take, so you don't have more tension on the wound, right? So the skin is kissing each other, and so you know there's no tension. Now, what I also do, and again it depends on the patient, is if they have lower lid fat, then we do what's called a transconjunctival approach, and what that means is you pull down the lids like you're scaring the girls in 3rd grade, okay, and you go in that way. They call the conjunctiva, and you go and you can take the fat out that way. I like doing that because that kind of leaves the muscle like a wall. Now, again, it depends on the patient. Sometimes you can modify or need to modify things. Now, what I like to do at the same time is called a canthopexy, and Dr. Glenn Jelks really kind of taught this to us when he was a visiting professor. And what you do there is you have your upper lid incision, so you have an incision there. You have your lower lid incision, okay, and you take a suture from the lateralmost part, the corner part, and you go ahead and you take a suture and you go from the top underneath the little skin bridge. You come out, then you take a bite of the little canthus area there, and then you bring it back through the skin bridge, and then you go ahead and you adhere it to the covering, the periosteum of the bone over there. So, and that kind of goes ahead and brings it up a little bit and gives you a little bit more of a vector of support. So, because I'm kind of a pants and suspenders kind of guy, and so I want to have as much support for that lateral lid as I can.
Right.
And so that, I think, is
and
really,
that is a tricky surgery because
really,
if you
really
overdo that, you can cause issues, right?
Yeah, and some so basically, again, you have to see how much tension you can put on it. Some folks, really older folks, they really have a lot of lid laxity where you go ahead and you take the lid out and it just doesn't boing come back.
Right.
You're 16-year-old, you pull the lid back and it goes boom right next to the globe. Some older folks, you're kind of laying out there, you're like, oh gosh, and so then you really got to tighten up those guys. So again, like anything else, you have to do the physical exam best you can and see what might work for that patient. And then sometimes you have to test things while you're in the operating room and see what might work for that patient. Yeah, and then post-operatively, it's important too, because for us, if those folks really stick to ice and elevation and those sort of things, then they get less swelling, less bruising, less pain, and they get along the line, down the line a lot faster.
Well, when we see folks that kind of related to that, but when we see folks that most would consider maybe overdone plastic surgery-wise,
sure.
What do you think is the common cause of that?
Well,
obviously the patient could be the common cause.
A couple of things, that's multifactorial, right? And one is how much does the patient demands, and then there's some patients say, "Doc, I want every line out." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you're Sharpay. There's no chance, right?" So, some guy came in with a picture. He was a kind of rock and roll guy. He looked like with the picture, he looked like he walked out of a flock of seagulls, right? With the big swoop hair and all that stuff. He said, "Yeah, I want to look like I looked back in, '85. Well, me too, but
It's tricky, right? Because you want them to be happy, but at the same time,
but you have to have reasonable expectation. Now, I think that old photos are great because you can see structure, you can see where their jawline was, or that's great. But then again, you have to have reasonable expectations, and the bones, literally and figuratively, can be really good. And then we're kind of reupholstering the couch, if you will, and moving the soft tissue around the bony structures. And so that's where the challenge is. Now some folks push the envelope a little bit, and so some folks get kind of a little bit unnatural results, knowing that, hey, it's going to look a little weird right now.
I'm going to stop you. Hey, Jack, Nigel's going to go nuts when he hears the typing. Sorry, because I know I'm going to get that email. So, and we're almost done. So go ahead.
Okay, so we were talking about the blepharoplasties. Repulsing the couch. Okay. Yeah. So basically, if people have really good bony structures, then you're really kind of putting the soft tissue back around on top of the bony structure. And again, Professor Gil Gradinger said, "Hey, Jeffrey, you want to hear the secret of good plastic surgery and getting good results?" I'm like, yeah. What's the secret? He said 40 years of plastic surgery experience, and he was on the board of plastic surgery and everything. I'm like, yeah. I'm a doctor. Doctor, tell me. He's like, he says, operate on good-looking people. So I'm like, oh, okay, that helps, right?
I do photography, as you know. That's also.
Wait, no kidding, right? So Bo Derek walks in your office,
exactly.
Right? Or Raquel, it's just somebody like that. You're
already starting off in a good place.
Right? So I mean, please. So having said that, is then you. But the main, to your point, is you don't want to, in my opinion, you don't want to overdo it. That's where guys get in trouble. Is let me go ahead and change her. You don't want to change her, or him, for a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. You want to put things back where it used to be. And for me, the goal is for people to look freshened up. When they finally are kind of done, that they're people around them go, "Wow, you look great." I was like, "Are you doing aerobics now? Are you doing Pilates? Right. What are you doing?"
Yeah, that's a good place to be, right?
Right,
exactly.
And so you don't want to walk in and like, "Oh my God, what happened?" So that's not the reaction that you really kind of want.
Yeah, we see that in Vegas sometimes.
Yeah, and again,
not only Vegas,
everywhere, but especially Las Vegas is unique because again, a lot of the red carpet folks in LA, here in New York, and Las Vegas, that's part of their currency as well, and so they take it seriously. I mean, they're always going to the gym, they're taking care of themselves for the most part, etc., and they rely on guys like me. And I always tell them, you just do little things along the way. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go for the big blue plate special, okay, or whatever. Because usually, to your point, blepharoplasty is usually 40s and 50s, facelifts 50s and 60s, but some guys keep going back to the well. And
we've seen some celebrities that they don't look like.
Right. So when you're on your fourth facelift, that might be pushing it a little, but again, it depends on the extent, et cetera, et cetera. So again, natural results are, in my mind, always the goal. Freshening people up so they look like them, but just a better variety of them because time's going to win, right? So time keeps going on, and then plastic surgery, we cheat it a little bit, and then time marches on, then we cheat it a little bit. So, but you're going to look better at the end than you did if you otherwise hadn't come to the plastic surgeon's office. And there's a lot of really good looking gals out there that have had little things along the line. Again, your Baudère, your Sophia Loren, your Raquel Welch's, your Christy Brinkley, she's ridiculous.
Right.
There's your
Kathy Ireland.
Kathy Ireland, super ridiculous.
Yeah.
Holly Berry's. You have all these folks that have had surgeries along the way, and they're great, and they're doing their thing, and more power to them.
Right. Yeah. And I think, ultimately, the goal is to look refreshed. And I know I have some friends that you've done that for. You did the partial flat facelift and looked amazing. And again, she didn't look overdone. She just looked, I won't say her name because she'll be mad at me.
Like Herba freshened up. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. That's absolutely the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. How can people find you online?
Oh, sure. We're all over. So the cornerstone, of course, is the website, which is www.jjrothmd.com. That's JJROTHMD.com. And then also, we are all over on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of that stuff.
All the usual.
All the usual suspects. And we do look at the stuff. So, we monitor it best we can. And so if you have a question or that you want us to cover or any concern that you want to ask us, do call the office. We still answer the phone with a human being. And
awesome.
we love questions. And so one is we love answering questions people may have. And then two, we like educating as well. And I say this to my patients all the time. I'd rather spend 20 minutes with you in my office than you spend 20 hours on the internet.
Right. And we do have several videos we should mention on your Instagram page talking about facelifts, talking about injectables, a lot of different topics.
Sure.
So they're welcome to check that out. They're all up there. And we're actually always doing more of those.
Yep. So we're constantly going ahead and trying to update. And if there's new information, we want to go ahead and get that out too. So again, if you have questions and concerns, contact us by any means necessary. And then we'll try to get that good information out to you.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Please check out the information, social media, websites, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds fantastic. Guys, have a great day.
Thank you so much for joining us. For further information, please visit the podcast website link for Dr. Jeffrey Roth. See you next time.